Injuries are forcing the Chicago Bears to experiment with some different players in different positions and some new lineups at training camp, including Velus Jones playing a full-on running back position.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all your favorite social media platforms. We've got clips on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook as well, along with, of course, the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our full video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Terms and conditions apply. On the show today, we take a closer look at some of the different things the Bears are trying out at this portion of training camp. Some different lineups together, some different players at different positions that maybe just seeing if some combinations work better than others. That could include a benching of a pretty expensive offensive lineman and a new position for a recent third-round pick in Velus Jones, and a lot of different things we're seeing from the Bears secondary on defense with injuries on that side of the ball. But I think the big one that we're all really curious about is what the future for Velus Jones looks like. The former third-round pick out of Tennessee has struggled to really find a consistent role on offense. And I mean, on special teams as well, but particularly on offense. At least on special teams, he's done some kick returning that has given you some optimism for what he might be able to do in that area, although he's certainly competing for those spots at training camp right now. But while also battling for kickoff and punt return jobs, he's trying to find his way on offense. And as a wide receiver, he's pretty buried on the depth chart, as are most of the wide receivers that aren't Pro Bowlers already, with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen at the top of the depth chart, Rome Odunze as a first-round pick coming in very next spot, and then Tyler Scott's clearly the number 4 wide receiver ahead of everybody else, and Velus Jones finds himself in that everybody else category. Like, at best, he's in the running for number 5 wide receiver, which just doesn't get offensive playing time in any offense where your first 4 receivers are healthy. And so that means obviously special teams is going to be a big part of winning that job, but also means maybe you take his skill set and see what he can do for you in other ways and maybe make him a little bit more of a gadget player. But I mean, we saw this be a successful transition for another big-bodied, fast return man in Cordero Patterson, who did this a little bit in Chicago. And now I think Cordero Patterson is actually listed as the first-team running back with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, believe it or not. So he's found a little bit more of a career rejuvenation at that position. We're not going to get that far ahead of ourselves with Velus Jones, but it's something this week that the Bears have said, all right, let's put Velus Jones in the backfield, do the running back drills, and just see how he does in that competition, which, by the way, has its own pretty significant set of talent at that spot to battle with, but it does increase his odds to make the 53-man roster and might actually be a pretty good fit for his skill set. Here's how Matt Eberflus explained the decision and how they're evaluating it.
With Velus, do you see him playing exclusively in the backfield going forward, or is it just this stretch here?
It's for the block, and then we'll reevaluate where it is. So again, like I said, he's got a lot of talent. He's open to moving around. Again, like we talked about, I think it was maybe last time we visited about, if you're the fringe roster or guy that's competing for that, 5th, 6th spot on the receiver or halfback, whatever it might be, the more you can do. If you're a 4-core guy in special teams, and the more you can, utilize your talents across the wider base of the team, I believe that's a good thing for you. So that's what he's doing.
When you said this block, how long is the block? Just this week?
Just through the Bills.
Yeah. And what does he need to show you to potentially stay there?
Just execution, and then show us your skill set. We're putting you back there because you're fast and you're a bigger, stouter receiver that does a good job in the return game, and you can utilize him in a bunch of different spots back there. And it'll be good to line them up in different spots. So just the operation of that.
It certainly seems like a great idea for Velus Jones to try and find more ways that he can have an impact on this offense and create more value for himself to justify keeping one of the 53 roster spots at the end of the preseason. But I can't help but feel like this is something they maybe should have started sooner. You know, like we're 2 weeks into training camp already, and now we're just putting him back there. Like if I were Velus Jones, I would have been certainly volunteering for this on the front end. Put me in any drill you're willing to put me in and let me learn every position I can. I mean, I realize it's a lot on his plate and you don't want to overdo it, but like we've already seen the Bears occasionally dabble with this in the past, right? This is not Velus Jones's first time ever doing running back stuff with the Chicago Bears. I look back at his snap counts. Last season, he played 7 snaps at running back. And even as a rookie in 2022, he played 4 snaps in the backfield. It's mostly, motioning back there and stuff. Like, it wasn't like truly, it's a little bit more gimmicky at that point, not like truly running back type handoff plays. But still, like, it's not like this is the first time anyone's had the idea to put Velus Jones in the backfield. So it just seems like it would have been smarter to do this earlier in the process to give him more of a head start there, to try and, instead of trying to catch up halfway through training camp, or I guess we're not quite halfway through training camp, but still, after a full preseason game in which he didn't play in the Hall of Fame game at all. No special teams, no offense, no snaps whatsoever. So like he hasn't had a lot of opportunities to show what he can do in the backfield and to show what he can do at wide receiver, or really show what he can do as a kick returner, which remains one of the interesting questions unanswered from that Hall of Fame game, is why didn't Velus Jones play more or get more return opportunities? But the fact that they're trying him out at running back suggests that they're trying to find ways to see where they can keep him on this roster. The problem is there's a lot of competition at running back, just like there is at wide receiver. We know DeAndre Swift's the number 1. You've got Herbert and Roschon Johnson battling out for the number 2 and number 3 spots, but like that leaves Velus Jones at best for running back 4, competing with Travis Homer. And I think what this is all going to come down to is, regardless of running back or wide receiver, it's just going to be a special teams battle. Last season, we saw Velus Jones finally get more involved in the non-return aspects of special teams. Last season, he played on the kickoff coverage team and made some tackles. He played on the punt coverage team as a gunner a couple times. He was even on a couple of the punt returns as a blocker and not as the return guy. And so his path to the 53-man roster this preseason is going to be a lot more about what he does on all 4 phases of special teams than what he does purely as a running back or as a wide receiver. And it's going to be Velus Jones versus Travis Homer versus Freddie Swain, Dante Pettis, Colin Johnson. I mean, all of those guys are competing not necessarily to say who can be the best offensive weapon, but who can be the best special teams player across a variety of special teams roles. And they're kind of competing across positions, just like how Velus Jones is not purely competing as a running back or purely competing as a wide receiver, but like you need X number of special teams players. And some of those are going to be running backs, some are going to be wide receivers, some are going to be tight ends, some are going to be defensive backs and linebackers, and they're all sort of competing for the same spots, even if it's not all guys at their own respective positions. So that's still, I think, going to be the primary focus for Velus Jones' path to the roster. But a role as a running back can certainly help add a little bit more value to this team and maybe squeeze more out of a third-round pick that continues to be a little bit more underwhelming up to this point. Also been underwhelmed by this Chicago Bears offensive line that has dealt with a bunch of injuries through training camp. They're getting healthier at every spot except one, right guard. And Matt Eberflus opened the door to a true open right guard competition despite all the money they're paying Nate Davis. So we'll take a look at how that battle might play out and where the health of this Bears offensive line stands just a few days before their second preseason game next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right candidates for your team faster and for free. I'm on LinkedIn. I bet you're on LinkedIn. And if you're not, a lot of your friends, family members, and coworkers are all a part of LinkedIn. But that doesn't mean they're all looking for jobs right at the same time. And that's what makes LinkedIn so cool, is that it's not just a job board. So LinkedIn helps you find and hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but hey, they might be open to that perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The Bears may have a job opening on their offensive line. We've speculated about it throughout the offseason, really, at this point, at least from minicamp and OTAs to the early days of training camp. What are they going to do at right guard? It is Nate Davis's job to lose, and he seems to be losing it because he can't get back on the practice field and stay back on the practice field. A couple of different times, he has started the day returning to practice and then not finished that practice, and then starts the next practice, returning to practice, can't finish that practice, leaves with the trainers or whatever. And at this point, like, it's become such a consistent inconsistency that the Bears not sure if they can rely on him exactly, because yeah, he might be your best right guard when healthy, but those last two words have proven to be so challenging for him that if you can't rely on him being there, you might be better off playing a player who, in a vacuum, on paper, is a lesser player at that position, but you can trust that that player will be able to stay on the field from snap 1 to snap 65 over the course of the games, whereas Nate Davis hasn't been able to be out there practicing with his teammates, with Caleb Williams, with the new center, whoever it's going to be next to him, and being a part of this offensive line rotation. And other guys have been able to plug into right guard, and other guys have been able to practice well. And as much as the Bears have been pretty insistent throughout this process that, yes, when healthy, Nate Davis is the starting right guard, that tone has really been changing in the last week, maybe a handful of days from Matt Eberflus, to the point now where he's basically saying, listen, like, if you're not out there, it's a competition for your job, and you can easily lose your starting right job spot, Nate Davis, who he doesn't call by name, but Nate Davis, if you aren't back out there consistently. That's just the nature of the business in the NFL. Here's how Matt Eberflus describes this position. And he tries to kind of couch it at the end by saying, well, it's not just right guard, but like his comments here very clearly about right guard.
And back in June, you said that the expectation was that Nate Davis would be the starting right guard, given how much time he's missed and the need for continuity in front of Caleb. Is there a timeline that you need Nate back before that no longer becomes the expectation?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you have to look at all those things. If a person's out for an extended period of time, and a player that's in that position is playing very well at a starter level, and doing a good job there, then you create the competition. Then you say, hey, there's a competition. People say, well, you can't lose a job because of injury. I don't think that's true. I think that if the guy that's playing there, gives our team a good look and a good benefit for him being in that position, then it's a competition, or the other guy could take it over. But that's not just at guard; that's at all positions.
That's his way of saying, listen, the longer Nate Davis is out there, the more is out, not out there, but the longest Nate Davis is out, the longer or the better chances there are of someone else starting at right guard week 1. I don't think they've made that kind of, permanent decision today. I don't think he's saying, yeah, we're for sure going to bench Nate Davis and start Ryan Bates at right guard or whoever they decide to start there. No, but I think he keeps opening the door to that possibility more and more every time he's asked about it and every time Nate Davis is not out there, because they've just gotten to see a lot of everyone else at that position. And if other players are playing well enough at that position, then you're going to take them out to put in a Nate Davis who you just haven't seen play that position much, certainly not in Shane Waldron's offense since he's been here as offensive coordinator. I mean, we know Nate Davis has been a quality starting guard throughout his career when healthy and on the field. This is not necessarily a question of Nate Davis's talent or ability when he's healthy and on the field. It's a question of his ability to be healthy and on the field. And it's been training camp, OTAs before that, half of last season, some of training camp last season, and then a few different times dating back to his time in Tennessee. Like, it's not that it's necessarily his fault. I mean, he's not trying to get injured. He's not trying to miss practice. I mean, maybe we could speculate, is there more he could do to maintain his body, or could he try harder at rehabbing and getting back out there? I mean, we don't know that on the outside. You can speculate about it, but I don't know that we have any insight on that whatsoever. I largely think not really Nate Davis's fault, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be his fault. It's still his problem, and it's the Bears' problem to say, well, we got to get a right guard, and sorry, Nate, it might not be your fault, but it's a business, and we need the best offensive line possible for Caleb Williams, and we need guys who are going to be out there, and, we don't hate you for it, but it's just the way it works. You got to get someone else out there. So, I mean, at this point, it feels like the Bears' week 1 starting offensive line combination should be Coleman Shelton at center and Ryan Bates at right guard. I mean, their ideal lineup, as we know, is, Braxton Jones left tackle, Tevin Jenkins left guard. Ryan Bates is kind of the first choice center, with Nate Davis as the first choice right guard, and then Darnell Wright at right tackle. But like, if we take Nate Davis out of the equation temporarily and say, all right, he's just not healthy or whatever, then your best offensive line combination is probably Ryan Bates at right guard and Coleman Shelton at center. We've seen the backup veteran that they signed this offseason, Matt Pryor from the 49ers. We've seen him get some run at right guard throughout training camp. So that's, a real possibility for someone who could be in the starting lineup if they decide, we just really want Ryan Bates to be our preferred center because he just won that competition and is better. We've seen Jatari Carter start games at right guard in the past. Larry Borum has also started games at right guard in the past. So they have a lot of different options they could choose to play for Nate Davis. Bill Murray has even gotten some first-team reps there, although I don't think he's going to legitimately compete for a starting job there. Even Jake Curhan, the free agent they signed from the Seahawks, started games in Shane Waldron's offense at right guard. So all in all, the Bears built this offensive line to have options to replace Nate Davis just in case. And we seem to be reaching that just in case point here, where the injury situation hasn't gotten better. And you'd like to have him out there, ideally, but we're not living in the ideal world with this offensive line right now. We're in Plan B. We're approaching Plan B world here because it's just not playing out the way the Bears want it to. And so this is the time, much like with Velus Jones at running back, this is the time for them to experiment with different right guards and say, okay, who's playing best there? Who is our best option? Are we better off leaving Ryan Bates at center or playing Ryan Bates at right guard? Is there another right guard option that gives us a better chance there? And I think at this point, I'd probably kind of put my money on Ryan Bates playing right guard and Coleman Shelton playing center. And I'd like them to just lock in that lineup so Caleb Williams and the whole offensive line can build that continuity. But I imagine we'll see at least another preseason game, then the joint practices with the Bengals, and maybe even the third preseason game before they really lock in their starting 5 offensive line and say this is who the group is going to be up front for this season, or at least the true starting group with or without Nate Davis, depending on how his health goes over the next 2 weeks. It's really approaching make or break time for him in this job, and the Bears would not be afraid to bench an $11 million right guard. We've talked about that a few different times on this podcast. So it's go time. See if his health improves and if he can get back out and stay back out on the field. But unfortunately, like, as much as I would like to see Nate Davis be successful, I don't feel like I'm able to count on that at this point, and the Bears don't either. The Bears also need to see their defense start to get a little bit healthier. They've had a lot of guys on that side of the ball missing practice, which has meant some new opportunities for some different players in there, but also feels like maybe then the offense should be playing a little bit better at practice than it is. We'll take a look at the situation defensively with a lot of different guys missing at practice next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is sponsored by our friends at Gametime. Gametime is the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. Whether it's going to a Bears preseason game, or I used Gametime to buy Bears regular season tickets last year. Plus, they've got comedy shows, concerts, theater shows. I mean, you name it. If there's a live event in your area, Gametime is the best secondary marketplace to get your tickets. I use the app all the time. I use it to go see Blink 182. I've got Green Day tickets later on this month. Plus, it's always there for me whenever I want to find out just what shows are going to be in my area, and I want to go check out all the coolest acts. I love Game Time because in the app, when you're picking your seats, you can see what the view will look like in the venue from those seats. So you know exactly what you're getting. And they have all-in pricing that'll show the total upfront without any surprise fees coming in at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We've talked a lot about the injuries on the Bears' offensive line over the course of the offseason. We've kept close tabs on different players rotating in and out there, but we haven't spent as much time on this Bears defense, where guys have not been available all the time either. And we're a little bit less concerned about it because, well, we kind of know what talent this defense has, and none of the injuries have seemed to be major or missing a lot of time. And a lot of the guys missing time anyway are the veterans that don't necessarily need it. You know, like Montez Sweat has missed a lot of practices. Some of those have just been veteran days off, but like Montez Sweat doesn't need to be out there. But it feels like the secondary in particular has been the one that has dealt with the most, and that's certainly continued this week at practice. If you look at who's been out there and who's not been out there so far, during practice on Wednesday, Terrell Smith left with an injury after trying to make a pass breakup. So that meant the Bears were without Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon, obviously then Terrell Smith, and Jaquan Brisker all in the secondary, plus Montez Sweat and Andrew Billings left practice with an injury as well. There have been days where Jalen Johnson gets veteran time off, Kevin Byard as well. Like, I don't know that there's been a day where all 5 of your starting secondary players, your 3 corners and 2 safeties, I don't know that there's been a day where all 5 are gone. But it seems like on any given practice, you're missing at least 3 of your top 5 defensive backs, plus, you know, a couple of defensive linemen here and there. And that's been a great opportunity for a lot of the younger DBs that really aren't going to play at all in the regular season, for them to get on the field and get some key practice reps in against not only, you know, just the number one offense, but like DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze at wide receiver that can really push them and test them in new ways than playing against the second string guys that just probably won't be able to be quite as big of threats to the secondary and to the cornerbacks trying to defend those receivers. But it's meant a lot of playing time out there for, obviously, Terrell Smith, we just mentioned, who got injured today, or on Wednesday's practice. Jalen Jones has gotten a lot of time at the outside cornerback. And then they've rotated in guys like Greg Stroman and Josh Blackwell and Reddy Stewart, the undrafted rookie free agent out of Troy. Those guys have all played a bunch of different slot snaps because Kyler Gordon has been missing for quite a bit of training camp practice. It's been one of the kind of under-the-radar concerns here. He has missed a lot of practices. And I mean, I like to think that in now year, 3, I think, for Kyler Gordon, that, you know, he's established enough that he doesn't, I mean, these practices would help, but he doesn't need them to be ready to go for week 1. But it would be nice to get him back out there. But still, it's also nice to have the valuable reps for, again, Terrell Smith, Jalen Jones, Greg Stroman, et cetera, who don't get that time to play in the regular season. So this is like their true development time when you can get those reps under their belts, because they're just not going to get, in theory, if everyone else is healthy, they're not going to get those regular season reps. Same thing for like Elijah Hicks and Jonathan Owens and Adrian Colbert and Tarvarius Moore at safety, right? Like some of these guys that you don't rotate safeties in this Bears defense. So those guys are playing now, and that's a good thing for helping these younger players get better. I'm not that concerned about Kyler Gordon missing practice and that hurting his ability to play well this season. I mean, he needs to be healthy. That's the most important thing, and the practices are less important than that. So as long as he's good to go for week 1, I'm not going to stress too much about him missing a week of training camp practices or whatever over the course of that process. But I am starting to, I'm not worried or concerned yet, but I'm starting to just think about the idea a little bit of like, okay, like Wednesday was another practice where the offense struggled. You know, some incomplete passes. There might have been an interception in there too from Caleb, but like just some poor operation from the, a sack, a intentional grounding. I mean, not a real sack, but a play that would have been a sack, but they're not allowed to hit Caleb Williams. An intentional grounding on a play. Like the offense stalled at practice. And we've said all along, like, hey, brand new offense, rookie quarterback, new players in a bunch of new positions. It's going to take time. They need to be patient because they're practicing against a well-oiled machine on defense with some Pro Bowl caliber players and guys who've all played together. And it's like, okay, yeah, of course, the defense should be beating the offense and should be ahead of the offense in a lot of these practices. But once you start missing some defensive starters due to injuries and veteran rest days, then the defense should be less far ahead of the offense. Like, I understand when Caleb Williams is trying to throw against Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson, Kevin Byard, and Jaquan Brisker, that's a pretty darn good secondary, and you would expect he's not going to be the only quarterback that maybe has some troubles getting the offense going against that group. But when the secondary is Terrell Smith, Jalen Jones, Kevin Byard, and Jonathan Owens, if you're throwing to DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze against backup secondary and some backup defensive linemen as well, like, not that the offense should then instantly dominate them and have the best practice of their life, but you'd like to see the offense as a whole make some bigger strides if they're practicing against some of the backup defensive players in the starting lineup. I'm not ready to be overly concerned. I'm not ready to panic. I'm not ready to predict some sort of bad season for the offense or anything like that. It's still training camp. It's still small sample sizes, one practice at a time. And it's still really early for this Bears offense. Like, that's an important thing to keep in mind. Like, as much as we're like, I mean, especially if you're a daily listener of Locked On Bears, right? We're dialed into what's happening every day at training camp. And you can start to feel like, wow, it's been, 10 plus training camp practices. When is the offense going to get this? But at the same time, it's August 8th. You know what I mean? It's not August 30th and the offense is struggling. We've got a lot of time, 3 more preseason games plus 2 joint practices. They're still throwing new stuff at Caleb Williams, and he's still also making good plays in addition to the parts where the offense stalls a little bit, right? It's not like they're doing nothing good and it's all bad and we should be totally concerned. No, it's just like, do want to start seeing more progress, especially against the backup defense. And we have seen progress, and it's not that they're behind schedule or anything yet, but again, like we're starting to get to that midpoint of training camp where we'd like to see that process speed up a little bit and the improvement start to be a little bit more visible. Far too early to panic or anything like that, but I think it's good experience for the defense to have backup secondary players getting some extra snaps against the first team, and it should be better for the offense sooner rather than later, as maybe the opponent at practice is a little bit easier with these injuries throughout the way. Clearly, the preseason games against a real opponent that aren't your teammates are going to be a big measuring stick as well. We are expecting to see some amount of Caleb Williams against the Buffalo Bills on Saturday. Matt Eberflus made it sound like today, as this podcast comes out, Thursday, there will be more of a clear plan in place for how much they're going to play Caleb and what the offensive line is going to look like. So when we do know, you can be sure I'm going to break it down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure then that you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for your second listen, how about you listen for your fantasy football team? It's your team every day. That's all your teams, including fantasy football. And Locked On Fantasy Football is here to help you get ready for your fantasy football drafts. And it's here for you all throughout the season to know who should be in your lineups and what moves you should be making on the waiver wire and so much more. So check out Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Coming back tomorrow for another Locked On Bears and presumably a Caleb Williams preseason playing time update. We'll also be previewing Bears Bills on Friday's podcast as well. So lots more coming your way throughout training camp and the preseason. Almost made it all the way through without choking on myself. I was scratching for the last 10 minutes and I almost got out of it. But I wanted to make sure that I could wrap up the podcast by giving you a proper opportunity to bear down.